So, welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to welcome among us today Waldherr, who is usually at the Freie Universität Berlin, where she's a communications researcher. But she and her husband are currently in Boston, spending time in the US until the fall. Annie is at Northeastern University, and she has done a lot of work in areas related to network analysis, but also computational types of communications, computational social science. And I thought it would be great to invite her to give a presentation. Actually, Volker was going to visit to discuss some work with me, and they happen to be father and daughter. Actually, it's like the next generation carrying the torch of the previous generation, and so somehow we chatted a little bit this morning. Volker thought maybe the fact that we had this complexity seminar and computational seminar in Meersburg, in beautiful Germany, where he's at the University of Constance, which is a beautiful region of Germany with a view of the lake and the mountains, and it's also a top university. And so maybe that spawns of some of your interest in the field. It's great to have you here. And so Annie agreed to give a short presentation on her work on food safety in online issue networks. So it's a great pleasure to have you here. And then she also does work on computational agent-based modeling. And if there's an interest in it, I'm sure you'd be willing to say a few things about that too.
Sure. Well, thank you for the warm welcome and the introduction. I'm glad to be here and to talk about my current work on what has been termed the network public sphere. So this is the broader context in which I'm doing research, and food safety is for us one of the cases that we are studying more in depth. So this is a short outline of my talk today. I will start with some theoretical background on issue networks and political challengers, and then I will talk more about the methods that we are using to study the structure of hyperlinked networks and what is discussed in these hyperlinked networks. And then I will present some selected results for the US case. And then at the end of my talk, I will devote to a methodological prospect, which also has to do with my previous work on agent-based modeling of dynamics of public issue attention. And I would like to bring together this work of issue networks and then putting it more of a dynamic perspective on it, and then extend my agent-based model to also work out how the dynamics in these issue networks online work. And I have to say that much of what I present today originated in the context of a larger research project, which is funded by the German and the Swiss National Science Foundation. And I work with colleagues in Berlin, especially Barbara Fetsch and Daniel Meyer and Peter Mildner, but also colleagues in Switzerland at the University of Bern. And we collaborate heavily since 2 years with computer scientists from the university in Leipzig who are experts in natural language processing. So that's the context of my work. So why are we interested in studying online issue networks after all? I want to start out with the larger theoretical framework in which our research is placed. And for us, looking at hyperlinked networks on the internet is a way to observe opportunity structures of political challengers, like NGOs fighting for a special cause such as food safety, and to learn about their opportunity structures and potentials to mobilize public awareness and public attention. So we draw on social movement theories that civil society actors who have common interests and experience certain grievances, they build coalitions and networks, and they want to mobilize for these issues and generate public awareness. And so this draws on the outside initiative model of political agenda building. And new media such as the internet, but also social media, offer new discursive opportunity structures. So they offer other venues than traditional mass media to talk to a larger public. Because traditionally, in the traditional mass media, social movements particularly have only limited, very restricted access and are disadvantaged compared to more established political actors. So this is the theoretical framework that we draw on. Our research questions right now are pretty much explorative, so we are still in a stage more of describing the networks that we study and explore them. So we ask who are the driving actors mobilizing for food safety on the internet and how well are they connected? And then on the other side, we are also interested in what are their main issues, so what do they talk about? I will later on talk more about these two dimensions that are in there. Why are we interested in food safety? In the US, like in other Western societies, questions of food safety are increasingly publicly contested and politicized. So GMO is certainly an issue that has also been increasingly discussed, and there have been protests on Twitter, but also marches against Monsanto, for example, in the US, and similarly in European countries and societies. The question of how safe is the food that we eat is very important to the general public. And there are more and more civil society organizations that deal with this issue and generate public awareness for it. So we work with the notion of issue networks, and this goes back to a group in Amsterdam, Rogers and colleagues, especially Maris. They coined this term issue networks in the context of hyperlink networks on the internet, and they speak of issue networks as simply web pages that are connected by hyperlinks and that all treat a particular issue. And from the perspective of a communication scholar, I conceive of these issue networks as issue-specific public spheres on the internet. So we don't conceptualize the public sphere as one public sphere anymore, but it's several public spaces that are connected to each other, maybe overlapping. And on the internet, these public spheres may be structured as hyperlink networks, and can be measured also like this. And then we have been also thinking about whether these mere hyperlink networks, what can they tell us about the mobilization potential of political challengers in this new kind of public sphere. And drawing on existing research of the public sphere, we identified two main dimensions. So the one is structural connectivity. The more relationships between actors that are speaking to a larger public exist, the more integrated this public sphere can be. So it's the communicative relationships between actors that we are interested in. Of course, when looking at hyperlinks, these relationships, they can have different meanings. So it's not so clear what a hyperlink really means. In reality, it can be just a neutral reference to another actor, another web page, another organization, or it can mean that we support this other organization, but you can also place criticism and then connect a hyperlink to it. But no matter what kind of reference it is, there is a reference, so it integrates this field of communication. And then another important dimension, when scholars think about how well integrated is a public sphere, is the content synchronization, we call it. So to which extent do the different actors talk about common issues that they have in common? So then in terms of the hyperlink network, do we see that on different web pages in the hyperlink network they talk, for example, about the issue, the sub-issue antibiotics. And if we find this, we could say that this issue network is well integrated. So how do we measure these issue networks? First, we have to collect hyperlink networks, and we use the tool issue crawler, which is provided by this team in Amsterdam. It's publicly available online, and what you have to do is you have to define source seeds, source URLs, and the crawler simply connects outgoing links from these source URLs. So we did a research, a deep Google research, and also literature research to identify the main important political challengers in the US and in other countries that deal with the issue of food safety, and we collected these URLs as seed URLs. And then you have to define several parameters. One is how deep the crawler crawls on one domain, so it follows all the links starting from one web page on the same domain, 2 levels deep. And then the next step is it crawls horizontally to other web domains, and they are also 2 levels deep. And then the crawler also collects all the links that are pointing back to the pages already in the network.
So it's only the 2 levels deep is that you can set it, right? Could you
That's
tell it to go,
you
or
have
is
to
this
tell
the
it.
default? Could you go 3 levels deep or 5 or 1?
This tool actually offers different crawling mechanisms first, so you have to choose if you want to use the snowball procedure that we chose here. We chose it because it's the most intuitive thing to do, but the thing is that the network gets very large very soon. You can also choose a kind of co-link procedure, so that another web page is only added if 2 other web pages that are already in the network point to that page.
Is it, sorry to
Yeah,
censor
you
my
can ask
start.
questions.
Sure,
at any
yes.
time. Yeah.
You set the floor.
So is it, how specific to an issue is the crawler? Can you set the specificity, or does it use a keyword?
Yeah, that's exactly the thing, the problem. It's the issue crawler is named issue crawler, but actually it doesn't care about issues. So what we did is we added a keyword search with another tool, the Visual Web Spider, to check if specific keywords are found on the web page, and then we just deleted all the web pages and the links that don't deal with the issue. So there are different approaches to that. Some researchers say if you extract only a core network, where, for example, you only have web pages with 2 incoming or outgoing links, this is a kind of core network around these source seeds, and then it necessarily is kind of restricted also automatically. But this is only an assumption. And we tested this assumption for our case, and we found that we have a lot of noise in it. So we added the step with the keyword filter.
And so the crawler that's open source, it's in the public domain, or do you have to get
Issue crawler?
permission from Richard?
It's in the public domain, and everyone can use it. We also use it for seminars with students, but you are queued in a long queue, so it might take a lot of time. And if you want to do many crawls that are quite huge, like we did, they say you can pay a fee, and then they will prioritize your crawls.
So can you implement, but can you take the source code and use your own cloud services, or do they maintain it? It's for, anyone can use it, but you can't take the source and implement it yourself?
I don't think that you can take the source yourself, but I think you should contact Rogers then to ask for that. So for us, this was a good solution. It's not that expensive. I think it was €500 for the first phase of our project. Yeah. And if you have some time to wait, then then it's okay also, just with the usual setup. Okay. And then what we did also, because we were interested in what organizations do the web pages belong to, we manually coded the organization. So if, for example, there were several web pages and also several web domains that belonged to Greenpeace, we just merged them all to be one node, one organization. And then we also coded attributes, whether this is a political actor or an economic actor or a media actor or civil society organization, and so forth. And so this is an example of the network from the US from June 2014. And here we also clustered groups that are more densely interconnected. And the nodes are the organizations, and the edges are hyperlinks between the organizations. And the bigger the node is, the more incoming links the node has. And so this is the food safety issue network for the US, and it shows several cohesive subgroups with more densely connected subgroups. And what is quite amazing is that here in the US network, and this is different from other networks that we study we also study the UK, Germany and Switzerland. And in the US we have the highest proportion of media actors in the network. So the civil society actors heavily connect to media websites.
Just to be clear, when you're talking about media actors, you mean news organizations, or what other type of organizations fit media actors?
So these are websites of traditional media, such as New York Times, Washington Post, and so forth, but also mere online newspapers, such as Huffington Post, or but not blogs. So blogs of traditional mass media we code it as mass media, but blogs of really individual citizens we coded here as citizen blogs, and blogs of NGOs were coded as NGOs.
Another question I have about that is, where would food producers and distributors fit into this, or do they?
Economic actors.
Economic actors.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you don't find a lot of these. You find a cluster here where we have the main governmental actors like FDA and so forth. But most of the clusters, and this is also due to the fact that we started with political challenger source seeds, are mainly driven by NGOs and other civil society actors.
Why wouldn't the food companies be interested in trying to track this? Is it just because they're not aware of it?
So you have to be aware that this is a civil society actor-induced network, so they do not link very much to socio-economic, to economic actors, and also the economic actors, they don't seem to be interested to provide hyperlinks to NGOs that are critical of them. So what has been found in other research on issue networks is that although hyperlinks might also express criticism, most hyperlinks are more supportive or mere reference. So you refer to an interesting information on another website. This is often when NGOs set links to media portals, to interesting articles, so forth. And the mass media, they rarely link back to NGOs. So this is also what we have found.
Does the distance between those clusters mean anything, or is this just sort of, does the algorithm?
The distance between the clusters means that that there are there are more connections within the cluster and this cluster has more connections to other clusters. So, but I'm not very much into the details of this algorithm, this visualization algorithm.
How confident you, the cluster, just like a realization in real life, because in Quello has similar problem to interpret this kind of cluster. Just like this is a cluster network in a network, but how you confidence this is they work together as a cluster in real life. In real situation.
That's the question. What can you infer from these
Yes. How you interpret this
to
kind of
reality?
situation? Yeah.
Yeah, this is a huge discussion, and there are mixed results. So some found that some are very optimistic and say it's the end of the virtual, everything that Rogers, for example, what you find online really reflects what is going on in the offline world, but others don't find that. We don't have the chance to cross-check it with reality, but in our research we are mainly interested in what is going on online as a public sphere, so this is not really the question that we ask, but it's an interesting question. Yeah, there should definitely be more research on it. Yeah. Okay, so this is really gives us some information on how this issue network as a issue-specific public sphere is structured and what actors are taking place into it. But it doesn't tell us about what are they talking about when they talk. What are they talking about on their web pages that are on some issue of food safety? This is why we work together with computer scientists who apply probabilistic topic modeling to our networks. I don't know whether you are familiar or how familiar you are with this method. It's an unsupervised and inductive method of automated content analysis, and it describes a text corpus with latent topic variables. So it's for us it's a method to explore what are the actors talking about. And in the model you get a distribution of latent variables, and these variables are called topics over a set of documents. So you have to define how many topics do you want to get out of the model, and then you get a distribution of topics, and one topic again is a distribution across words. So it's a distribution of word probabilities over a fixed vocabulary. It takes every word that is in the corpus and attributes a probability to it to belong to a certain topic. And these are two examples of topic distributions. So here in topic A we have words with these words have a high probability: food safety, products, meat, beef, animal, news, chicken, poultry, salmonella. And so, like for example with factor analysis, you have, as a researcher, you have to interpret these words. What do they mean? How can they be described as a topic? And this reflects more of a topic like foodborne diseases, for example. And this topic, on the contrast, there you have words like pesticides, genetically organic crops. So this is more reflects more of the concern about genetically modified organisms. And then you get also, for each document, a distribution of topics. So one document can have several topics in it. So for example here you find words that belong to a yellow topic and words that belong to a red topic and so forth. And this might be the distribution for this document. So the red words that are clustered together across all the documents, they reflect more of a political regulation topic, for example. So this is the logic of topic modeling, and all of these distributions are initially randomly initialized, and then they are optimized so that for one topic you have as few words as possible, and one document should have as few topics as possible. So this is the optimization procedure, and it's basically a model that relies on Bayesian statistics. Okay, so what we did is we took a crawl and we didn't apply the keyword search to it because we were interested in if we do not throw out the web pages that contain our keywords, what topic clusters do we find? Because when we define, it was very hard for us to define keywords that really sharp keywords that grasp the issue of food safety, because it is such a broad issue with so many sub-issues, and we really wanted to take advantage of this inductive approach that we just see what is in the network. And we downloaded all the web pages in this crawl and archived them as HTML files, and this was the corpus that we applied, on which we applied the topic modeling process. Okay, so this was really our first pilot study with these topic models, and we originally wanted to extract 30 topics, but we realized that many of these topics were boilerplate, had a much of boilerplate content in it. So because we didn't initially we didn't extract only the text from the website, so we had a lot of navigation words in it, or advertisement and so forth. But fortunately, these words clustered together in topics, and so we could just sort them out and say, okay, this is a topic that is boilerplate and we are not further interested in it. And we ended up with 15 topics that we could interpret meaningfully. And here the topics are shown as nodes. The bigger the node is, the more of the original topic mass the topic contains. So the bigger the topic, the more web pages in the network talk about it. And then we also calculated the Hirschman-Herfindahl index as a measure of the concentration of the topic. So remember, we were interested in how diffused is a topic in the network. So how many of the actors in the network talk about this topic? Is it diffused across the network, or do only a few actors really talk about it? And we used this measure to measure the concentration of the topic. So the topics that you see with a light gray label, they are more concentrated than the ones that have the dark black label.
I'm sorry, what are you using for shares to calculate the HHI? Because to calculate an HHI, you need market shares or topic shares of something. So because you're calculating an HHI for each topic, right? So what do the shares that go into the calculation represent?
The shares represent the share of the whole topic mass. So every word that goes into the so the topic mass is all the words in the network in one huge bag of words. Okay. So what you can see here is that the majority of topics is quite well diffused in the network, so that many actors in the network talk about them on their web page, but there are some, such as antibiotics and consumer action, that are more locally confined. And on the next slides, I will show more detail on two topics. So one is contaminated food and regulation. So this is the Salmonella, E. coli, and all the foodborne diseases, and how public policy regulates it. And the other topic, because it's a nice contrast to the other, is the GMO topic. So this is a heat map of the topic. Now the intensity of the color shows the topic proportion of the topic on a website, because we have several topics on a website, but they might have different proportions in this distribution of topics in a document. And this is the heat map for the contamination topic, and you see that this topic is mainly discussed in the center of the network, but also on the left side of the network. So, in the bottom left, we have a very influential blog, the BAF blog. But what is more interesting is when we look at what are the main actors in the network that talk most about this topic. And here we see that, of course, we have civil society organizations such as Center for Food Safety.org or foodandwaterwatch.org that talk about this issue, but there are also several governmental organizations that heavily take part into this online issue network. And we have major news media, particularly New York Times and Washington Post, who report intensively about the topic. And as a contrast, the GMO topic, at a first glance, the heat map for the GMO topic looks quite similar. But you see a little bit that the focus of the debate now moves to the upper right of the network. And if we zoom into the most important actors, we see clear differences to the other topic. So this is a real, or more of a political challenger network, I would say. We have civil society organizations that are quite specialized on the GMO issue, such as gmwatch.org or Right to Know GMO.org. And then we have organizations that deal more generally with agricultural issues, sustainable agriculture or consumer rights. Again, New York Times is part of the network, but we also have more specialized media such as Civil Eats or MotherJones.com. And you don't find any established governmental actors among the most important actors in the network. So what are our preliminary conclusions? We find a quite well-integrated network of civil society actors discussing a number of specific food issues in the US. And most of the topics that we found at this stage of research prevail across major parts in the network. But if you look more closely at the specific actor constellations, these might vary considerably. And also the mobilization potential that you can attribute then to these specific actor constellations. And for us, this was also a proof that the method works, that this is a useful tool to combine topic modeling and network analysis to map the structures as well as the content of online debates. So now also some methodological prospects. So our work up to now is heavily focused on the structures, as I have shown you, and the elements that make up communication, public communication in such a networked public sphere. But what is really interesting to me and what I find intriguing are the dynamics that go on in these networks. In my dissertation, I studied attention cycles, but in the traditional mass media, in the press. My next project and what I will work on during the next months also at Northeastern University, is to draw these two pillars together somehow and see whether in how far are the dynamics in this new networked public sphere online different to the ones that we have extensively studied in the traditional mass media. So just to give you an impression, this is a short video of an agent-based model that I, for my dissertation, I have developed to model attention cycles in the mediated public sphere, meaning journalists reporting about issues. So I found agent-based modeling to be a powerful approach to develop theoretical explanations of empirical patterns that we observe. And in communications, we found very often in empirical studies waves of attention to issues. And my goal with this model was to, in a dynamic model, find the assumptions and the rules for agents that will generate this pattern in a computer model. And the logic of this whole approach is that if we can grow the dynamics and the patterns of interest in such a model, then this also contributes to explaining it. So we explain patterns and processes by growing them in the model. So this model shows 3 hypothetical topics, and the persons are journalists, and you see that when I let it run, then events are happening, and these are events that are just only randomly happening for the topics. And I implemented mechanisms that are kind of reinforcing mechanisms. So if many journalists report a topic, this topic will become more interesting to other journalists. And they will adapt to the reporting behavior of other journalists. But if the topic is on the agenda for a long time, it will become more boring. So these were the main mechanisms I implemented. And with this simple model, I was already able to generate these waves of attention that look pretty much similar also to what we can observe in empirical studies. And a nice thing.
So the next wave, what's other like specific events happening that trigger kind of the next wave of attention? Or?
In this model, it's simply that the red topic gets boring after a certain while, and then one interesting event in the green topic can trigger the mass of journalism to move.
It's interesting that the shift more or less will only focus on one. Are there sort of instances where there's more than one topic that is discussed actively, or is that constrained by the model parameters?
I'm not sure if I.
So let's say,
question.
Could there be that the red and the green topic are discussed in parallel?
I didn't find that in this model. That so if one topic is really taking off and experiences this breakthrough, I mean you often have this kind of random stage in between where you only have slight small waves, but if it really experiences then the breakthrough, then all the journalists will concentrate on it. I also simulated another scenario where I added agenda building into the model. So now you also have issue sponsors that create their own events, like public relations, press conferences, or so forth. And the nice thing is that with such a model you can experiment with theories, and you can see an additional assumption, how will it change the dynamics. And initially I thought I would need these issue sponsors to explain attention cycles at all, but I showed this was not the case. what you see now is that because you have more events on a topic, that the attention cycles get much longer, so they are prolonged. But what is also interesting is that they are more volatile, especially in the last stage of the cycle. So you have several smaller waves in this huge wave. Yeah, so and what I'm asking now is if I change the assumptions in a way that they reflect the structural change in the public sphere that we are experiencing now with online communication and social media communication, what does this mean for the dynamics of issue attention cycles? So when I for example, introduce networks between journalists, and because now that every journalist can perceive every event in the arena that is happening, and perceives also every report. It's global communication because it's a public sphere. But if you have a network public sphere and you can only see what your neighbors are doing, then maybe the whole dynamics will change. So I stop here, and thank you for your attention, and I hope we can go on with the discussion. And if you want to read more, you can check out my webpage. Okay. Thank you.